Hi, welcome back to this concept-based YouTube channel. Today we will discuss class 9 maths problem, chapter number 3, which is coordinate geometry. In last class we did the last portions of chapter number 2, which is polynomial, and for today's problem we have coordinate geometry. Now first of all, let us understand it. What is coordinate geometry? If it talks about coordinate geometry means coordinate geometry is that branch of mathematics in which it treats geometry algebraically. Alright, so this is basic definitions of coordinate geometry, and from that we have to understand it. Some definitions like Cartesian system, number line, x-axis, y-axis, origins, positive directions, negative directions, right? And at last we'll come at quadrant, first quadrant, second quadrant, likewise. Okay, and then at last we have abscissa, ordinate, Cartesian, rectangular ordinate, right? So these are all the things that we have to explain it today. Alright, now let us start it by taking Cartesian system. What do you mean by Cartesian system? Cartesian system are the system in which whatever points it is given in this, we'll use this one in order to get the positions of something which is present in this, right? So this kind of system which we use it for finding the things which is inside this pen, we call it as Cartesian system, right? Then that's it. That's the definitions for Cartesian system. And now let us come to horizontal. Let us come to number line. What do you mean by number line? If it talks about number line, suppose let us draw a line. Here it is origin. Let us take it as this. Alright. Here it will be 1, 2, 3. Here I'm writing it simply, but whenever you write, just made some scale with appropriate measurement. You have to made it a 1 unit in each of this, right? It will be -1, -2, and then -3, and then -4, right? So these are all the things. Here we have x. Let us take this one, x dash, and here it is x, right? Then if you start counting from this, you see here, though there is some numbers, there are some points which we call it as 0, from which we start counting even in this side as well as in this side, right? And we're separating its unit, its distance by 1 unit, its distance by 1 unit, alright? Even in both sides, even in this side as well as even in this side. So we call this kind of lines with a fixed point which is 0 or origin, and its distance is 1 unit in a line. We call it as number line, right? So this is the simplest definitions for this number line. If it is easy for you, that's good. But if you have any confusions regarding about this, you can ask me even in comment section. Then I will move to the rectangular axis or axis of coordinate. If you talks about a rectangular axis or axis of coordinate, then what do you mean by this? Let us take this. if you start from this is x dash 0x or x 0 x dash, and if you start it from here it will be y 0. That means x, what will it be? It will be x dash 0x, and after that we have y dash 0y, right? So if you take these two together, then these two will meet in this point. So the thing is that if it talks about rectangular axis or axis of coordinate, then simply the place where we take these two, even this side as well as this side together, then that process we call it as rectangular axis. Is this clear to all of you? Then we'll move to the next point, which is x-axis. If it talks about x-axis, the one that we made this line, and we name it as this x, and whatever things or whatever numbers it is, we call it as it is in the x line, or simply we call it as this line as the x-axis. All right, x-axis. The horizontal line we call it as the x-axis, and whatever it is present in this, and we call it as this is y line or y-axis. Understand? Then let us discuss about origin, the place where even x-axis as well as the y-axis intersect. We call it as origin. Okay, where is origin? This one, this point. Even in x directions or even in y directions, both of them meet each other at this point, and this point we call it as 0, or the other name we have is it is origin, right? Clear? Then x-axis. If it talks about x-axis, then the one which is in horizontal directions, or the one that we have in this, we call it as it is x-axis. And even in this, what is that? We put y, and this vertical line we call it as this y-axis. Right? Now, according to the definitions, or according to this, from 0 is fixed, and from 0, if we start counting in the left hand side, then whatever number that we come across, it will be negative, and we call it as the one that when we started counting from 0 to the left hand side, and that directions we call it as negative directions, right? According to the number system, separating by origins or the fixed point 0, if we start counting to the left hand side, whatever numbers it may be, it will falls under negative. And if you start counting from 0 to the right hand side, then whatever you may come across, that number will fall in the positive directions. So from this point, we came to know that if you start counting from 0 to the left hand side in the x-axis, whatever it will be, we will call it as it is in negative directions, right? Then whenever you start counting from 0 to the right directions of x-axis, we call it as positive directions, right? Same as in a y-axis. If you start counting from 0 to above or vertically, whatever number you may come across, all this number will fall in positive or plus, and we call this kind of numbers, or we call these directions as positive directions in a y-axis, right? And even in the downside, whatever numbers that you have in the y-axis in downside, that all these are belonging to negative, and those number which have negative or in which it is negative, actually it is in downside. So all this number will be negative, and these directions we call it as negative directions in a y-axis. Alright, so these are all the things which is necessarily to be understood in this. Then when we move to the next, we have quadrant. If it talks about quadrants, quadrant means this, by taking this as well as this x-axis, we have the space here, that we call it as quadrant, and this, even in this we call it as quadrant, here quadrant and quadrant, right? That means the space that we have, which is meant by this y-axis as well as x-axis, right? Two axes, it is x as well as y-axis. That space we call it as quadrant, and this will call it as, it is first quadrant, and this one will call it as second quadrant, and third we call this one as third quadrant, and this one will be as fourth quadrant, right? And let us write it. It is first quadrant, and do I have any idea what will it be in the next? It will be, it is first quadrant, and this one will be, it will be second quadrant, right? And thirdly we have this, it will be third quadrant, and after that we have one more, it is fourth quadrant. Is it clear to all of you guys? Then if it is clear to all, then we'll move to the next point, which we call it as the sign. Here, which sign will it be there? Actually, if there is some things which is needed to be specified in this space, first we start counting from this x. We start counting from x. That means first, if there is some point which is needed to be specified in this by using coordinate geometry, then we'll start it by taking the x-axis, and after that we have to take y-axis. That means x comma y. This will specifies whatever position, whatever objects or whatever things which is reside in this or happening in this, right? In order, likewise, first we have to start it taking from these directions. In the first quadrant, the x-axis that we have is in the positive directions. Thus, we came to know that the sign should be, it will be x comma y. First, x should be, it is, since it is in positive directions, here it will be positive. And secondly, we have this y. We have to take it this one again, and since this is in the positive directions, that means both these two, x and y, whatever things it is in this, that should have positive, even for x as well as for y, right? So this will be the sign that it will have in this first quadrant. Is this clear to all of you? Then let us move to this. As we just discussed, first we have to start it from x. Here we have x. We have to know in which direction x is. It is in the negative directions. That means first the sign of x should be negative, and then what is that? What is the next? We have y. Y is in the positive directions. It will be minus plus, minus comma plus. All right, whatever it is in this, the signs of x should be minus and the sign of y should be positive. Clear? Then let us move to the third quadrant. In third quadrant, what do we have? Same as this. Even in this, the sign of x should be negative. since the one that we have in this, all of these are belonging to the negative, then simply easily we can understand that x, whatever values that it will be in these directions, all of these will fall in negative directions. And this one, we have this as y. All the y that we have in this or its unit, all of these are belonging to the negative directions, right? Just because of that, here it will be x should be negative as well as y should be negative. Clear? Then if it is clear to all of you, then we will move to the fourth quadrant. Here we have a fourth quadrant. You can see from this, here we have x-axis and here we have y dash or y prime. It is in the directions of y-axis. Here we have x. First of all, as we just discussed it in the first quadrant, first we have to take into account the x. That means, what is this? X is in the positive directions. That means it will be, x should be positive. And right after this, we have this y. And let us check this. Y is in which directions? Y is in negative directions. That means plus and negative. Clear? Do you have any questions related to this? Alright, if it is clear to all of you, then I will move to the next point, which we call it as Cartesian plane or coordinate plane or XY plane. So it is easy. If it talks about Cartesian planes or coordinate planes or XY plane, simply it means that all the planes which comprises of all these four quadrant. So we call it as this Cartesian planes or coordinate planes or XY plane. Clear? That means all the planes comprising the first as well as second and this as well as this. All this comprising by all of this, all the plane that is comprised or that is first, second, third and fourth. The plane which is comprised by all this quadrant, we call it as Cartesian plane, coordinate planes or XY plane. Do I have any doubt in this? Then let us move to the next, which we call it as abscissa. What do you mean by abscissa? Alright, so suppose we have one object. Let us take here, we have one object located in this and we want to measure this position. First we have to determine the x-axis, and right after this we'll have to determine this y-axis. And let us suppose this is the dotted line which we have it even in from x as well as from this y. And in order to get these locations, first we have to start counting from these directions up to this, right? And this distance or these directions, we call it as abscissa, right? And after that, this is abscissa, and whenever you move it in upside, in order to get these locations in y directions, we have to move it from this point, which is origin. From this we have to move up to this, and the vertical distance or the distance which we move it from this to upside, this much. To get these locations, we call this one as what? We call this one as ordinate. Clear? Everything is clear? Alright, so let you check it if you have any problem in this. After that, we'll move to the next, which will be the last for this discussion. Alright, so I hope there will be no doubt in this. Then I will move to the next. At last, we have Cartesian rectangular coordinate. So this is the last topic that we will be discussed in this chapter before we move to the exercise. Now, in order to get this, let us name this as Q. This point is Q. To get these locations or to get these positions, you will measure it from this up to this and from this up to this and upside, right? So whatever x exists or whatever things that you take in x directions as well as in y directions, and this x and y directions form the rectangular coordinate of P, which is this Cartesian rectangular coordinate. This Cartesian rectangular coordinate is the one that we use in order to get these positions, which is x-axis as well as y-axis that we use. We call this one as Cartesian rectangular coordinate, right? And we denote it by, actually here it is like a rectangular, or it is like similar to rectangle, so we call it as rectangular. And the point that we are about to find, we name it as Q. And x and y, we take it as to get these positions, and we call this one as Cartesian rectangular coordinate of Q. Okay, then simply at last we will denote it, instead of writing in this, we'll denote it Q x comma y, which represent as it is Cartesian rectangular coordinate of Q, right? I hope everyone is clear. And those who have any problem in understanding all this, you can ask me through comment section. And I wish you all the best. And please go through all this so that we can move to the next textual exercise in next class. Hopefully we'll see in the next video. That's all for today. Thank you.